Welcome, witches, wizards, and muggles alike, to another enchanting episode of Magical Tales from the Slytherin Common Room, bringing your favorite Harry Potter fanfiction to audio format. So sit back, relax, and lock your headphones and let the magic begin.
Apostasy by Deydralinne, Chapter 50, Dreams for Tomorrow. Hermione's eyes fluttered open and she allowed the calm to wash over her and pull a small, content smile from her lips. Draco lay pressed against her, his face shoved into the side of her neck, where his sleepy little breaths warmed her skin. Hair falling in his face, his arms draped across her stomach lazily, and his cock hard against her side. The level of love that she felt for this man scared the shit out of her, but it made her all the more grateful to have it. In moments like this, when it was quiet and calm and no one was dying, she could lay there and count the breaths with each rise and fall of his chest. She could close her eyes, still her mind, and feel his heart beating against her shoulder. She knew that if it all went to hell tomorrow, she would still have this moment right here. She shifted onto her side carefully to face him and memorize the hard lines of his face that softened whenever she looked at him. Her fingers moved to carefully sweep the hair away from his face without disturbing him. It was getting longer all the time, and it made her heart lurch proudly, knowing that he was growing it for her. She stretched up and pressed a soft kiss to his lips, barely brushing them, but still, the sparks of electricity flowed through her. She kissed him again, harder this time, and even still predominantly asleep, he responded, pulling her flush against him, his hands spreading across her lower back and holding her firmly, his erection twitching at her front, her abdomen clenched in anticipation. The man only needed to exist, and she would be ready for him. Draco's hand, which was currently under her head, curled around, his fingers snaking through her hair. A dreamy hum vibrated against her lips while Draco rolled onto his back, taking Hermione with him to lay atop him, with her legs clumsily moving to either side of his hips. Draco deepened their kiss slowly, lazily in his half-asleep state. Hermione's core was pressed right against his erection in all the right ways. She gave a small roll of her hips, coating him in her arousal and causing his mouth to part with a quiet gasp. She repeated the action, but this time rolling far enough forward that she could line the tip up with her entrance and ground downward before sliding back and guiding him into her. A low groan fell from Draco's lips, his brows pulling into a frown. Hermione arched her back as she lowered herself down fully. The steel gray of his eyes made an appearance, blinking up at her slowly. His hips lifted slightly to meet her while his fingertips tightened their purchase on her as he sighed in relief. "I love you," she whispered against his lips before sitting back and rolling her hips again. Hermione's movements were unhurried and deliberate. Most of the time, she preferred hard, rough, fast-paced sex. But this morning, she was in no hurry. It was more about the need to connect on a spiritual level. His hands moved to her hips affectionately, rubbing up and down her thighs. "Gods, I love you too, baby." His voice was husky and groggy from his interrupted sleep. His cock was buried so deeply in her that even her smaller motions felt incredible. The morning sun shone into his room, flooding it in a golden hue and providing extra warmth. Their gasps and quiet moans plucked like a symphony from their souls. His hands roamed her body, caressing it and leaving behind a trail of his static energy that clung to her, compounding and building towards some bigger shock. Draco sat up to take one of her nipples in his mouth, sucking and kissing at the flesh, working his way over her chest, up her neck, and finally pulling her into a searing kiss. One of her hands wove into his hair and tugged lightly at the roots, massaging her fingertips into his scalp while she continued to rock against him. She felt too warm with her approaching orgasm, but the feeling of Draco's cool skin against hers sated her need for just a little while longer. So beautiful, all mine, forever, in this life and the next. Draco's hushed words sent shivers down her spine. Her hips had begun to roll against him with more urgency, chasing both hers and Draco's releases. He was close. She could feel it by the sporadic movements of his hips and in the heavier way he was breathing. His hand came up to cup her face, and she could feel the love pouring off of him and through his kiss and into her. "You're mine, and I'm yours," she gasped right before waves of pleasure began to roll through her, clamping down around him and gripping at his cock, still stroking through her. A desperate whimper of, "Oh fuck, Hermione, baby," before stuttered a few thrusts up into her and wrapping his arm around her waist, pulling her tight to him with one hand and curling his fingers through her hair with the other. His lips brushing lightly against hers as he let out a choked rasp, heat filling her as he found his own release. Slightly shaky, he pulled her back down with him, still tucked against his chest, stroking her hair and showering the top of her head with needy kisses. "That was a hell of a wake-up call, love," he mumbled, his vulnerability clear in his voice. A sharp knock on the door made her jump. "Hey, lovebirds, time to get up. Family breakfast." Theo's voice called through the wood. The sound of his retreating footsteps followed him down the hallway. Beneath her, Draco sighed and made no effort to move. "Galleon for your thoughts," she whispered. He pressed another kiss to her head. "Boilers. Just thinking about how much I love you is all." She turned her head and placed a kiss on his chest. "I love you too. But if we don't get up and get downstairs, then we might not make it to the end of the day to continue this." A low chuckle bubbled up out of him. "Well, we wouldn't want that now, would we?" Astoria was busy placing coffee for everyone around the table, while Blaze stirred something in a pan by the stove. Ginny, leaning against the counter next to him, gossiping about something or other with Theo. Pansy and Daphne both carted things from the fridge or bench to the table, which was now covered with dishes of sausages, toasted English muffins, bacon, fried mushrooms and tomatoes, fruit salad, yogurt, and poached apple halves that gave off a slight aroma of cinnamon. The wireless had made its usual appearance, playing a soft French song. "Oh good, I was worried we'd have to send in a search party," Ginny teased at Hermione and Draco's arrival. It had taken her longer to get dressed than she normally would, but it seemed that the night before, Draco had banished her clothes after their dinner instead of just removing them. So she had to steal one of his t-shirts and a pair of his shorts that only managed to stay up because of the drawstring. "Very funny. You, Ginevra Zavini, are hilarious," Hermione drawled, rolling her eyes. "Oh, someone's in a mood. Didn't you do your job properly, Dee?" Pansy smirked. "He definitely did," Hermione stated firmly, grabbing a cup of coffee and adding sugar and cream. "I'm just drained. I guess, sorry," Hermione sighed, sinking into a chair Draco pulled out for her. Blaze tipped the contents of the pan into a large bowl and everyone moved to sit down. Hermione took a moment to appreciate that they hadn't been able to sit down and do this at home for far too long. Going out to dinner had been nice, but this was her favorite type of meal. An apology from the great Hermione Granger. "Quick, someone mark the calendar," Theo teased. Hermione flipped him off without so much as a glance his way, instead eyeing the scrambled egg that Blaze had just placed down in the center of the table. "Cut it out, you lot. Of course she's tired," Astoria admonished. "She's been busy." Daphne snorted. "Yeah, being fucked." Even Hermione chuckled, despite the withering look she sent Daphne's way. Astoria glared in her sister's direction. "Saving my life," she hissed, ignoring the eldest Greengrass. "Fixing Tom and advising him, meeting with leaders around the world all the damn time. And," Astoria shrugged her shoulders in agreement, "enjoying some well-earned intimacies, which is why I have decided that I am going to step in and help you, as my way of saying thank you. Tor, you have 2 weeks left in the hospital," Theo warned in a way that said there would be no debate about it. Astoria would be going back to the hospital by the required 10 o'clock check-in. "Yes, and I can plan the gala of the millennia from the comfort of my hospital bed," Astoria declared. Several groans came from her housemates, namely Pansy, Daphne, and Draco, but Astoria ignored them, turning her attention to Hermione instead. "Tom is naturally persuasive and incredibly charismatic. He might have forgotten it for a while, but he is getting back to that, thanks to you. Get him together in a room with a dozen of other leaders, and combined with all of us singing your subtle praises, you will have countries flocking to follow you two." "That's not a bad idea, Story," Blaze said thoughtfully. "Please say you will let me," the blonde witch pleaded. "I haven't been able to help anyone any type of way for a really long time, Hermione, and I'm going crazy in that bloody hospital." "Sure, I don't see why not," Hermione shrugged, reaching for an English muffin and scrambled eggs. "I'll let Tom know." "Really?" Astoria straightened with a huge smile. Astoria needed this more than she had let on. The witch had spent her whole life with the knowledge that she would die at a young age, and for a large portion of those years, she had been too sick to really get much enjoyment out of the life she wanted. "Thank you. You won't regret it." I'm thinking that we can hold it at the ministry in the function room. We will need to invite the press, of course. Hermione shared a look with Pansy, who was smirking smugly at her, and Daphne, who gave her a look of, "You don't know what you've gotten yourself into." While Astoria continued to rattle off plans, ideas, and things that would need to be done, "Hermione, of course, you will need a new gown, and probably all of us, now that I think about it." Hermione shook her head and let her ramble excitedly, glad for the excuse of eating to just nod and hum her agreement on occasion. "So," Ginny purposely interjected excitedly, "who's excited about Diagon Alley being finished this week then? I think the biggest struggle will be filling the shops again. I know the ministry is having a hard time tracking down the owners that are still alive." Daphne rattled off while cutting into her sausage. Hermione's eyes locked with Ginny's, and she knew that the redhead was thinking of George and the joke shop. As far as the ministry was concerned, he had fled the country several years ago, and given his absence from the front lines, that made sense for them to continue to believe. Hermione wasn't sure if he had found his way back after Draco's little portkey incident, but perhaps if he had, he would be able to return to a relatively normal life. "Personally, I'm holding out hope that Madame Kronk is alive and kicking somewhere," Gil grinned. "The divination store? That old bird was certifiably insane," Blaze argued. "Yeah, but her readings were always highly entertaining." "They should be, considering the prices she was charging for the utter bullshit she would spout," Draco laughed from beside her. "I used to joke that she would be Theo's second wife." Astoria laughed and sipped her coffee. "Merlintor, she was like 120 years old," Pansy exclaimed. "And also, not at all morbid as hell to plan your husband's second marriage," added sarcastically. Astoria grinned and shrugged. "That's nothing. You should have heard some of the shit your sister used to say to me," Theo scoffed, piling fruit salad on his wife's plate. "Well, she's not going anywhere now," Daphne said pointedly, giving her sister a filthy look. "Except Disneyland," Ginny said casually, despite the confused look from the table. Ginny has always wanted to go to Disneyland. It's her goal for once all this political bullshit is done, Hermione explained when Ginny fell to. "It's not just that. We have family dinners. I vote that once a year we do family vacation too. Merlin knows we all have fucking earned it," Ginny tacked on. "Does it have to be Disneyland every year?" Pansy queried. "Because if we're doing that, I have always wanted to visit Tokyo." "When this is all over, we can make a bucket list," Hermione suggested, waving her fork around in a circular motion. "What in the fuck is a bucket list?" Ginny frowned. "You know, like a list of things you want to do before you kick the bucket." When they all continued to stare at her in confusion, she giggled. She sighed. "It's a Muggle saying. It's another way of saying before you die." Astoria snorted. "Well, it's too late for Daphne and me then." A collective groan sounded around the table. What? "What good is dying if I can't use it for joke material?" Astoria laughed.